The Orcs, those brutal and terrible foot soldiers of the Dark Forces, have long been a plague upon Middle-earth. They served the Dark Lords Morgoth and Sauron, fueling the fires of war and destruction across the ages. But what happened to them after the fall of Sauron? When the One Ring was destroyed and the forces of darkness were vanquished, did any Orcs persist in their wicked ways, or did some, haunted by a longing for redemption, seek a path to peace? Welcome, explorers of Middle-earth, to a journey through the forgotten histories, where we uncover the fate of the Orcs after the end of the War of the Ring. In order to understand the true nature of the Orcs, we must first journey back to their creation, to a time long before the great conflicts that defined their existence. Middle-earth, under the watchful eyes of the Valar, was a land of beauty and light. The first beings to awaken were the elves, the firstborn children of Eru Ilúvatar, whose eyes first beheld the stars. Yet, in the shadows of the world, Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, harbored a burning desire. He sought to create his own race, a twisted reflection of the elves, but one that would serve only his dark will. However, the flame imperishable, the divine spark of life, belonged only to Eru, and Morgoth could not create life as the Valar had. So instead, he corrupted. The elves who strayed too far from the land of their awakening were ensnared by Morgoth's forces and taken to his fortress of Utumno, where they underwent horrific transformations. The purity of their being was perverted, and from these tortured souls, the first Orcs were born. These creatures, twisted by Morgoth's malice, were a grotesque mockery of the once noble elves. They bore the marks of corruption and evil, their forms deformed and minds bent to violence. Despite their appearance, many believed that Orcs, being corrupted versions of the elves, might share the same immortal nature as their progenitors. But Tolkien's writings reveal a harsh truth. Evil can only corrupt. It cannot create. Orcs, unlike the immortal elves, were doomed to be short-lived, subject to disease, death, and decay. They were a race born from the darkest of evils, and their time would ultimately be limited. As we continue our journey through Middle-earth, we find ourselves at the height of the War of the Ring. The Orcs, as numerous and fearsome as ever, have become the instruments of Sauron's tyranny. From the walls of Dol Guldur, they march against the elven realms of Lothlorien and Mirkwood, wreaking havoc and sowing destruction. Their numbers are vast, their cruelty unmatched. Yet, as the forces of good rise up to meet them, the Orcs are driven back again and again. In the aftermath of the War of the Ring, the fate of the Orcs becomes a matter of great uncertainty. With the fall of Sauron, the dark power that held them in thrall has been shattered. The Orcs, once mindlessly serving their Dark Lord, are now adrift in a world without direction. Some, broken by the loss of their master, choose to end their own lives, unable to comprehend a world without war. Others, driven by pure instinct, retreat into the darkest corners of Middle-earth, seeking refuge in caves and mountains where they can continue their existence free from the gaze of the free peoples. But could there be hope for any among them? Is it possible that, freed from Sauron's domination, some Orcs might seek redemption? The question lingers, one that has been pondered by many, but answered by few. For Tolkien himself, the answer is not simple. In one of his letters, he suggests that Orcs are naturally bad, a product of Morgoth's most grievous sin, and that they would forever bear the mark of their corrupted origin. Yet he also acknowledges that redemption, while unlikely, is not entirely impossible. The dialogue between two Orcs, Gorbag and Shagrat, offers a rare glimpse into their desires beyond the battlefield. In a quiet moment, they speak of a future where the war is over, where they can escape the endless violence and find a place of peace. What do you say, if we get a chance, you and me'll slip off and set up somewhere on our own, says Gorbag, longing for a life of freedom. But is this yearning for peace genuine, or simply a reflection of their fatigue and self-preservation? As we examine the fate of the Orcs in Middle-earth, we are forced to confront the harsh realities of their existence. While the possibility of redemption may exist in theory, Tolkien's work suggests that it is unlikely that Orcs, shaped as they are by evil, would ever escape the darkness that defines them. Their existence, once tied to the will of Morgoth and Sauron, seems destined to fade as the Age of Men takes hold. The Orcs' brutal legacy will eventually be erased, their kind hunted to extinction as the free peoples of Middle-earth rise to create a new world. In the next chapter, we will explore how the Orcs' story intertwines with the downfall of their Dark Lords and the end of their warlike existence. Until then, the question remains: could any among them ever find a path to redemption, or are they doomed to be nothing more than a footnote in the history of Middle-earth? With the destruction of the One Ring, the fall of Sauron, and the collapse of his Dark Empire, the world of Middle-earth was forever changed. No longer was the shadow of Mordor a looming threat across the lands. The armies of the Dark Lords scattered, and for the first time in centuries, the free peoples of Middle-earth could breathe a collective sigh of relief. But in the wake of this hard-won victory, a haunting question arose. What became of the Orcs, the foot soldiers of Sauron's malignant power, whose very existence had been entwined with the darkness? After the war, the Orcs found themselves in a strange and uncertain position. Without their dark master to command them, they were leaderless, purposeless, and adrift. For many, their entire existence had been bound to the will of Sauron, and with his fall, the crumbling of their cause left them like wandering spirits, bereft of direction. Yet, like cockroaches surviving the devastation of a fallen kingdom, some Orcs continued to cling to life. The question, though, is why? What drove them to persist in a world where their master was gone, and where the very forces they had served were now defeated? The immediate aftermath of Sauron's defeat was chaotic. Orcs, still reeling from their loss, had no unified front or cause to fight for. They had been born from darkness, twisted by Morgoth and Sauron, and their purpose had always been one of war and destruction. But with the fires of war extinguished, the Orcs found themselves in a paradoxical state of existence, alive, yet with no real reason to live. Some chose the path of despair, unable to cope with a world no longer ruled by war and chaos. In desperation, they cast themselves into pits or chose to end their lives, unable to imagine anything beyond the shadow of their former existence. However, not all Orcs succumbed to despair. Some, perhaps driven by a primal instinct to survive, retreated into the hidden corners of Middle-earth. The misty mountains, dark forests, and forsaken caverns became their refuge, where they could lick their wounds and plot their next move. These survivors, though diminished and scattered, still harbored a deep hatred for the free peoples of Middle-earth, especially the men who had brought about the end of their masters. And yet the question of whether any of these Orcs could find redemption remained unanswered. Tolkien's writings offer only tantalizing glimpses into the minds of the Orcs after the War of the Ring. In a rare moment of introspection, the Orcs Gorbag and Shagrat express a desire to escape the endless violence of war. What do you say, if we get a chance, you and me'll slip off and set up somewhere on our own, says Gorbag, imagining a life where they can live free from the bloodshed. This brief exchange provides an unexpected humanizing moment, revealing that even the most brutal of the orcs may at times dream of peace. But is this desire for a life beyond war a sign of redemption, or simply a reflection of their exhaustion and desire to survive? Tolkien's exploration of the orcs' potential for redemption is one of the more debated aspects of his work. In his letters, he speaks of orcs as naturally bad, a creation of Morgoth's malice, and yet he also suggests that they too are part of the world that Eru Ilúvatar created. According to Tolkien, evil cannot create, it can only corrupt, and the orcs are the prime example of this principle. They were born of corruption and thus could never truly be good in the same way the elves or men were. Their very nature was shaped by the dark forces that created them, making the possibility of redemption seem distant at best. Yet Tolkien also leaves a flicker of hope in his musings on the orcs' future. He writes that they are part of the world, which is God's and ultimately good. This suggests that, despite their origins, the orcs may have a place in the broader cosmic order. It is a philosophical question that lies at the heart of Tolkien's work. Can beings created from evil ever escape the darkness that defines them? And if they can, what would redemption look like for such a twisted and corrupt race? As the age of men dawns, and the dominion of the free peoples of Middle-earth expands, the orcs, though still scattered, find themselves increasingly isolated. With the rise of new kingdoms and the growth of peace and prosperity across the lands, the orcs' way of life becomes ever more obsolete. Their caves, their dark fortresses, and their savage ways become relics of the past. The world is moving forward, and the orcs are being left behind. This inevitable march toward extinction seems to be the orcs' ultimate fate. In his notes for the unwritten sequel to The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien famously speculated on the decline of the orcs. He envisioned a future where men, not orcs, would serve as the primary antagonists. This absence of orcs in the sequel hints that Tolkien did not see a lasting role for them in the future of Middle-earth. The orcs, it seems, were destined to fade away, their existence fading into the annals of history, leaving only their legacy of violence and destruction behind. The ultimate fate of the orcs, then, is a tragic one. As the free peoples of Middle-earth rise, united in peace and progress, the orcs, broken and scattered, become an echo of a bygone era. They continue to live in the shadows, their hatred and bitterness never fully extinguished, but slowly and inexorably fading from the world. And so, the age of the orcs draws to a close, their once mighty presence now relegated to the pages of history, a grim reminder of the cost of war and corruption. But in this fading darkness, there lingers a question. Could there have been a place for redemption, even for the orcs? Was it possible that, given time, some might have turned away from their evil ways and sought a path of peace? Tolkien's answer remains ambiguous, a tantalizing mystery that only adds to the complexity of his world. In the end, the orcs' legacy is one of sorrow, a cautionary tale about the dangers of corruption and the harsh reality of evil's persistence. As we move on to the next chapter, we will delve deeper into the philosophical implications of the orcs' nature and their place in Tolkien's vision of Middle-earth. Is there a place for mercy, even for those who have been shaped by darkness? Or is the path of destruction the only one that can be walked by creatures such as these? As the age of men unfolds across Middle-earth, the orcs, once the scourge of the free peoples, fade into obscurity. The vast armies that once filled the battlefields are no longer mustered in the name of darkness. The lands that were once marred by their brutal raids and ceaseless wars are now rebuilding, prospering under the rule of kings and the governance of men. The great kingdoms of Gondor and Rohan stand tall, the forests of Lothlorien and Mirkwood heal, and the lands of the Shire remain untouched, blissfully unaware of the old shadows that once threatened to consume them all. Yet in the deepest caves, the darkest mountains, and the abandoned strongholds of Mordor, there are whispers of survival, of hatred, and of a world in which the Orcs, those twisted remnants of Morgoth's malice, might still have a place. With Sauron's fall, the Orcs no longer have a dark lord to command them. In their confusion and despair, many succumb to their fate, either wandering aimlessly or meeting their end in the deep recesses of Middle-earth. Some fall into madness, while others turn their anger and violence inward, becoming little more than a tragic remnant of a bygone age. It is clear that they are no longer the fearsome force they once were, their strength diminished without a master to drive them forward. But the Orcs have always been survivors, even without the guiding hand of Sauron. The Orcs continue to persist in the hidden corners of Middle-earth, living in caves and forgotten places, holding on to their hatred for the world that has cast them aside. Their presence is faint, their numbers dwindling, but they are not gone. In the shadow of the great cities and kingdoms, they linger, watching as the age of men rises and flourishes. The question remains, however, can the Orcs truly ever be wiped from Middle-earth? Or is there always a possibility for their return? Tolkien's world is one where evil never truly disappears. It simply waits, hiding in the shadows, ready to strike again when the time is right. The Orcs, in many ways, represent that persistent evil. Though their power has waned and their numbers have thinned, the shadow of Morgoth lingers in the hearts of those who remain. The very fact that some of the Orcs have survived, fleeing into the wilderness to carve out a desperate existence, suggests that they are not easily eradicated. Yet, despite their endurance, the Orcs' existence is ultimately one of defeat. They have lost their war, and their very nature condemns them to be enemies of peace and prosperity. Even if they survive in the shadows for generations to come, they will never be accepted into the new world that is rising. The free peoples of Middle-earth, elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits, will always remember the darkness that the Orcs once spread. The legacy of the Orcs is one of destruction, and no amount of time or healing can erase that stain from the world. In Tolkien's unfinished writings, he envisioned a future in which the Orcs were absent from the stage of Middle-earth. His proposed sequel, The New Shadow, hinted at the rise of new antagonists, humans, who, much like the Orcs, could be driven to evil and violence. The fact that the Orcs were replaced by men in this narrative suggests that Tolkien did not foresee a lasting place for the Orcs in the world he created. They were a race born of darkness, shaped by the most wicked of beings, and once their masters were defeated, their existence became irrelevant to the future of Middle-earth. In the end, the Orcs' fate is one of tragic inevitability. Their very nature, their origins, their purpose, and their destruction make it clear that they could never fully integrate into the world of peace and hope that was slowly being built after the War of the Ring. Their legacy is one of violence and evil, and no matter how much time passes, their sins will never be forgotten. The Orcs, as a race, are destined to fade into history, their last breath a whisper in the wind, lost among the ruins of a world that has moved on. As the age of men continues to unfold, the Orcs' place in Middle-earth grows ever smaller. Their story, once so vital to the great conflicts of the past, is now little more than a shadow. But in their fading, they leave behind a lesson, one about the dangers of corruption, the cyclical nature of evil, and the importance of resisting the lure of darkness. The Orcs are a reminder that evil, once unleashed, can never truly be eradicated, but it can be defeated, and it can be overcome. The world of Middle-earth will never forget the scars left by the Orcs, but it will also never forget the strength and resilience of those who stood against them. And so, with the passing of the Orcs into history, we are left to ponder the ultimate question: is there any room for mercy in a world that has been so deeply scarred by evil? Can any creature, no matter how corrupted, ever find redemption, or are they doomed by the nature of their creation? In the end, Tolkien's works offer no simple answers, only the complexity of a world where good and evil are in constant tension, and where the possibility of redemption, though faint, always lingers on the horizon. As the winds of time continue to blow across Middle-earth, the last remnants of the Orcs' once feared presence continue to fade into legend. The great armies that once thrived under the dark banners of Sauron are no more. The world has entered a new age, one where men, elves, and dwarves rebuild and thrive. Yet, even in the deepest, darkest corners of the world, there remains a faint echo of the Orcs' legacy, a reminder of the destruction and chaos they once spread, and a lesson about the nature of evil and its enduring mark upon the world. The passage of time, however, does not erase the scars left by the Orcs. The lands they once ravaged slowly heal, but the memories of their cruelty linger in the hearts of those who survived their reign of terror. The elves of Lothlorien and Mirkwood, forever marked by the bloodshed of their past, remember the battles fought in the shadow of Orcish cruelty. The men of Gondor and Rohan, though victorious, still carry the weight of the wars that nearly destroyed them, and even the hobbits, living in their peaceful shire, can never forget the sacrifices made by those who fought to protect their homes. In the years following the War of the Ring, there is no grand resurgence of the Orcs. They have become little more than a footnote in the epic history of Middle-earth. Yet, their legacy persists, not as a living, breathing menace, but as a lingering symbol of evil's capacity to corrupt and destroy. The Orcs, born of Morgoth's malice and perpetuated by Sauron's dark will, were ultimately defeated, but not without leaving an indelible mark on the world. But what of the remnants that remain? What of the scattered Orcs, who, in the wake of their master's fall, still wander the shadowed places, existing in a broken state of half-life? They are the last of their kind, the final echoes of an era that is now passing into the distant past. They no longer command armies or spread terror, but their hatred and bitterness still linger, like ghosts unable to fully depart from the world. As the free peoples of Middle-earth move forward, the Orcs, unable to change their nature, are ultimately pushed to the margins of history. The world that emerges after the War of the Ring is one of rebuilding, reconciliation, and hope. The new age is not without its challenges. There are still remnants of darkness, still shadows that threaten to resurface, but the strength of the peoples who stand united against it is greater than ever before. The ultimate fate of the Orcs, then, is not one of destruction at the hands of their enemies, but of oblivion. Without a master to serve, without a cause to fight for, they drift away into the forgotten corners of the earth, like remnants of a fallen age. The lands that were once tainted by their presence now flourish with new life, and the memory of the Orcs, though never completely erased, becomes little more than a whisper in the wind. The legacy of the Orcs serves as a warning, a reminder of the dangers of corruption and the enduring impact of evil. Though they were defeated, their existence is a testament to the fact that evil, once it takes root, can leave scars that last far beyond its reign. But even as they fade into nothingness, the Orcs leave behind a legacy that serves as a final lesson, that no matter how dark the times, no matter how great the evil, the light of hope and unity will always shine through. In the end, the Orcs, though born of darkness, are ultimately consumed by the very same darkness that created them. Their fate, sealed by their own nature, is a tragic one, but it is a necessary one for the world to heal. The free peoples of Middle-earth, in their triumph over the darkness, ensure that the Orcs' legacy is not one of continued war and suffering, but of a world that rises above the shadows, embracing peace, growth, and the promise of a brighter future. As we close the final chapter on the Orcs' tale, we are left to ponder the deeper questions of redemption, evil, and the cycle of history. In Tolkien's world, nothing is ever truly gone. Even as the Orcs fade into the past, their story endures as a cautionary tale, a reminder that the fight against darkness is never truly over, and that the hope for a better world must always be carried forward by those who are willing to stand against it. Thus ends the tale of the Orcs in Middle-earth. Their story, though brief and full of destruction, leaves a mark on the hearts of those who remember. But in the end, it is the light that endures and the shadows that fade, as Middle-earth continues its journey into a new age of peace and prosperity. And so, we bid farewell to the Orcs and to an era of darkness long past, knowing that their influence, though waning, will never be entirely forgotten. For in every story, there is always a lesson to be learned.